We're running it back today with Kurt, FIFO worker turned mortgage broker who's built a $5 million portfolio. And we're going to run through the blueprint as to how you can do it in today's day as a FIFO worker going from 0 to 3 properties in 3 years. Welcome back. You're on site with the Property Tradies, and we've got Kurt from Blue Collar Money coming back for episode 2 of the little 2-part series. He's a mortgage broker who works directly with FIFO workers and tradies, and is an ex-FIFO worker himself who's built a $5 million portfolio. And last week we went through your story, Kurt, and how you were able to do that utilizing your FIFO job. Now today we want to go through how the FIFO worker of today can replicate what you've done and the different stages they need to go through, where they should be buying, and exactly how to do it. Welcome back.
Sounds good, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's still pretty cold in Melbourne, but we're going to get through that today.
Yeah, I saw you wake up at our house in your undies this morning and you look like you saw a ghost.
Yeah. I was very cold.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, so I think before we get into the strategy and the different stages you work through, I think it's important to touch on the current market conditions and what we're seeing. The game plan has changed than compared to 6 months ago. So there's been new tax changes, interest rate rises, and the sentiment out there is fairly smashed at the moment. What are you seeing on the lending front?
Yeah, well, obviously negative gearing has come into effect. It's been mandated now as of, I think it's going to be the 2nd of July. So that's probably the biggest change in my space.
Yep.
A lot of lenders have jumped on the front foot though. We are seeing improved serviceability. But it's the conversation with the client around, if you're going to lose 10, you would be usually getting $3,000 back. Is it an investment strategy? No. But you need to be aware of the cash flow loss on property. And that's why it's probably more and more important now to buy well, right? Because if you've got no incentive, like no negative gearing, which is a sweetener, and you're going to lose money, you best bet your bottom dollar that it's going to go up in value, right?
Yeah.
So, from a lending, there's a lot of conversations around that more than just the actual lending changes.
Yeah. So from negative gearing being gone, meaning property costs more to hold for the average punter, and borrowing capacities also decreasing. You're seeing on the buying front, on our end, a lot of demand shift from the middle range properties to then the lower price points where that cash flow is a little bit stronger, and just because of borrowing capacity, it pushes a lot of people down to that mark. So I'm sure with the strategy we're about to speak about, there is going to be a bit around high yielding properties and where that fits into the portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, SMSF's also been smacked on the head. Again, that's something that we probably won't touch on today, but that was also another clip on the...
Yeah, well, we were going to do a whole potty on SMSF and we've pivoted to this, but I think this is going to be more high impact, honestly, and especially on the back of that change. So before we get into the first phase, which is the foundations, what is the typical FIFO worker that you see in their 20s or 30s? They might be single or in a couple that are looking to get ahead through property. Where do they typically sit from a savings and an income perspective?
Yeah, income, it could be dad works in the mines or mum works in the mines. Typical mining income, probably anywhere from 150 to sort of 200 grand, depending on the experience there. There is lower entry FIFO jobs, and it also depends on if they're full-time, casual, all that stuff. So often the casual jobs are paid higher, but they're not permanent. So pretty solid income. And then, savings is arguably, we don't, it can vary. But if we want to call it a number, we're going to start with like 150 as a savings. Is that what we use as an example, I suppose?
Yeah.
What's the goal here? We want to try to get to how many properties?
I think 3 properties in 3 years, super achievable if you're using the 150 to 200K income as a rough starting point, and then savings of anywhere from 1 to 150 as well.
Yep. So probably to kick it off, we sort of, when someone's got that sort of 6 figures in savings, they don't know what to do, right? That's probably something I see a little bit. They don't. There's just so much out there. But if the goal is to stack a few assets and go from 1 to 3 properties, then what we do first with that first chunk of money is very, very important. It's important what we buy and how we split it.
Yeah, cool. So with building that foundation, obviously with your story on the last podcast, you showed how you were able to save 50 grand in a matter of 6 months. So when you are getting from 0 to 3 properties, what are some of the key things that you need to establish from a habits perspective that's going to help you achieve that goal in the early stages before you start building?
Yeah, look, a savings plan, right? So something that I did really well was I journaled my money. So like when you're out at work, out on swing, I would write down like, this is what I'm taking home. These are my expenses. So like a real basic budget. And working out a surplus, I'd always leave enough for what I needed for my days off to have a bit of fun. Don't go too hard. You got to have fun too, but then multiply what you can save by X amount out of weeks to reverse engineer where you can come to with your deposit or your savings.
Yeah.
And it starts to manifest because you start going, oh, well, if I just stuck to this, this is the outcome. It's just like going to the gym. It's just being consistent with it. And so if you can, and start with pen and paper.
Yeah.
It makes it more real.
It does. You actually process what you're writing and thinking
in your
about.
head, and then obviously digesting as much information as you can around property and talking to the right professionals. But you can't do much without savings.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat to that, yes, there is options. We can use guarantor loans and stuff. But I think from a financial planning perspective, or from my perspective, just having good habits in that space, not just for savings, but with your mindset. It's actually, you'll get more out of it by just doing that than maybe the outcome of the property, because you're learning how to manifest and how to really put things into action.
Yeah. So figure out, how long it takes for you to save a particular amount of money. It might be a year, might be six months, and then you're able to really figure out where you're going to be in that next 1 to 2 years from a deposit perspective, and how much you can actually afford to hold from a holding cost perspective in your property portfolio.
Yep.
And I think another really important thing in the initial stages that you briefly touched on was building your team of professionals. You can save well and buy property, but if you don't have the right people in your court that have done what you want to do and understand the game plan that's going to work best for you, it's going to be very hard to stay on that track if you're not surrounded by the right people. So with you working directly with FIFO workers and tradies, of course, what professionals do you think are really important to have on your team, and what should you look for in those professionals?
Yeah, well, obviously, probably number one is a mortgage broker.
Yep.
I don't think you should be speaking to them prior to speaking to a buyer's agent, just based off the fact that you can't buy property without finance. It's a game of finance. A good property investment savvy broker can probably change the outcome of your journey pretty quickly. Because you could have a non-investment specialist and sit down with a generalist and walk out more confused, and then probably park your property dreams.
Yep.
So I can't stress this enough. Find someone who's done it or is an investment savvy broker. And then the next person in your arsenal is obviously like a buyer's agent or someone who can help you source that property if it's not something that's in your local backyard. But again, to touch on that, in a market where we have to be super selective with what we buy, you can't just buy anything. No. So that's where an investment savvy buyer's agent is a smart play. An accountant is also very important for taxation and structuring if we need to look at that as well.
Yeah. So the accountant, typically, if you are building to 3 properties, might come in around number 2 or number 3, depending on the big term goals.
Yeah.
But initially, I think what you said is really important. Go directly to a mortgage broker, and don't just start working with the first one you speak to. Have a couple of conversations and find one that you relate to and has done what you want to do, because they're going to keep you on that path to achieving your goals. I've worked with a lot of brokers for clients that come in with their own brokers, and there's a huge difference from a mindset perspective that a broker feeds into you with one that has no idea what they're doing compared to one that is passionate about property and understands the game of finance. So Guys, have that conversation with multiple brokers and find someone that has done what you want to do. Build your team and create some strong savings habits.
Yep.
So basically, once we've created that team and we've got our savings ready, and you've had a chat with you, Kurt, about borrowing capacity, you then move into getting off the sidelines. So we're wanting to buy that first property. What's, I guess, the specific strategy before you go and buy that property? If you do want to get to 2 or 3 in the next couple of years, what's very important to ask a broker before you go and just buy a property?
Yeah, well, that's where like being an investment savvy broker. So they're going to be looking at the property, not just the lending, right? And understanding that don't be putting all their eggs in one basket. Like
Yeah.
we've got 150 grand saved. Some brokers say, yeah, well, that's great. That's a 20% deposit on X, and that'll cover this. But then you've just put all your cash into into one property that could go bad or good. So trying to look where I call it like a lending mud map.
Yep.
So it's something I do. I sort of map out if someone's like, look, we want to do 2 or 3 purchases. How do we make sure we use that 150K best to get us 2 properties instead of 1?
Yeah, instead of
You're
one.
doubling up. Yeah.
Definitely. And me, when I first started my portfolio, having those conversations with an investment savvy broker meant that I could do that. And I had 100K. And why I was able to go from 2 was because of a guarantor loan that my dad gave me. So that's a really good way as well. I'm having a conversation with another client about this. He's 21 years old and 130 grand per year. He's got 100K saved and access to a guarantor loan.
Yep.
So basically what you can do is buy that first property without having to put up virtually any money. And then you've got that deposit there for the second one. But again, with having 150K, within 6 months of purchasing number 1, you're probably going to be able to buy number 2, right?
Yep, for sure. And it's not to say you couldn't do 2 purchases on 150K. However, it's probably going to be maybe a slightly cheaper price point for both products based on deposits, stamp duty, purchase costs, it starts dwindling away a little bit pretty quickly, but it's not unachievable.
Yeah, cool. So still in this phase of getting off the sidelines. So you've got your pre-approval, you're ready to go. What's the next step from there? So you're now looking to get into the market. You want to find a property that's obviously going to have decent cash flow and perform really strong from a capital growth perspective. What are the typical properties that you like for an initial buy in a portfolio where you're looking to go 2 to 3 in a few years' time?
Yeah, well, I think you need to be looking for something that's got land content, and it's ideally a house. Now, on that kind of budget and what we'd sort of see, another good thing that I like in any investment I buy, it's got to be affordable.
Yeah.
Not just affordable for an investor to buy, and affordable for everyday punter to buy, because that's going to see the most interest.
Yeah.
So when we throw the realestate.com app open and we go houses under 700 grand, for example, you don't have a lot of options. Like even in regional areas like Rockhampton, Townsville and all that, they've already sort of hit that mark. And whilst you could still buy it and the 6s maybe there, we wouldn't advise on buying there now because we've missed the jump. And they're not good long-term assets. I mean, they definitely can have a place in the portfolio, but we would rather have picked up that growth a bit earlier, right? Now, if we go back to where to buy, it's where to buy, right? We've got to look at the market doing the moving.
Yep.
And you'd be living under a rock if you don't understand that Melbourne's at the bottom of its cycle. And we've done multiple purchases down here, and I own property down here myself. So we look to that. I'm just going to put it out there. We're going to go for a max 700, like around a 700 purchase, maybe for that first one. Now, if we don't have negative gearing, right, and we want something with slightly higher cash flow, whether or not that's 4% yield in Geelong, or do we go regional Vic that's got a slightly lower price point, but the yields are the 5s?
Yeah, anywhere from mid-4s to 5s. Obviously, we've had some growth within the last 6-12 months. So when you have price growth, that grows faster than rental growth. It does slightly compress it, but nonetheless, there's still definitely options, closer to that 5% mark with that budget.
Yeah. And I mean, we are looking a lot at units at the moment, but they are probably something I would do as a second purchase to tack in pairing a house with a unit, cash flow on the unit. So your aggregate yield between the both is probably going to come out pretty good. If you've got a unit that's 6% yield and a house that's 4,
Yep.
aggregate yields 5, portfolios 7 and 500, so 1.2. I think that's probably the best outcome there.
Okay, cool. So let's rejig and think about this first purchase. So we're coming in and buying something around the $600,000 to $700,000 mark.
Yep.
We're going to be focusing on a house or a unit with a larger land component. You're
Yep.
talking 200 to 400 square meters.
Yeah.
Again,
I think we probably need to unpack that though, because for people listening in from Queensland, and you say unit with land, we associate units as like apartments. So you're talking like a villa unit. Do you just want to explain what that might look like?
yeah, so a villa unit in Victoria typically is going to be where someone might have completed a subdivision on a property, and you could have anywhere typically from 2 to 8 single level dwellings on a block. They can either have connected walls or they can be standalone. Typically, you're going to find it more common for them to be standalone, meaning like a little mini house, if it's anywhere from 2 to 4 on the block. If you're looking at something that's got 8 units on the block, they're probably going to have connected walls. But with the ones that have been subdivided, you can get larger land components on them than you would get in a greenfields area out in the deep depths of the suburbs. So while it might say unit on the listing, if you compare it to something a similar price in a different location, well, it's actually more of a house.
Yeah. We've seen some real crackers actually. And I guess for people listening in from WA or Queensland, I guess a townhouse would probably be a similar sort of product, but the products are very different. I personally own a villa unit in Chelsea. I'm quite a fan of the villa unit play. They're definitely larger rooms. They're definitely in better locations. So and the yield on them is pretty solid. So I think in that price point, don't be too afraid to say, oh, it's not a house, because at the end of the day, it's affordable. It's in a good location. It's in a suburb that's full of owner occupiers.
Yep.
And people don't have massive families anymore.
No, and a lot of, especially from a rental demand as well. In Melbourne, it's very common to want to live in a property like this. That's low maintenance. People are out and about a lot, going out with friends and having a very social life. So these type of assets, I think over the next 10, 20 years are going to see continued demand because of the lifestyle factors in Victoria, how the average person does live compared to other states as well. So with the first purchase, we've got potentially a house or a villa unit in Geelong or Metro Melbourne, or for a little bit more of a yield and land play, we've got some strong regional locations like a Bendigo, a Shepparton, even Ballarat as well, even though we're not buying there. These are some really good options to start the portfolio. And I think a key thing which you mentioned before is when you search on realestate.com and you put in houses sub a certain price, this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people do. They go on realestate.com, oh, this one's cheap compared to all of the other properties. Whenever it's very clear that this property is far cheaper than the rest that are on the market, there's typically something wrong with it, and it's cheap for a reason, right? We see this all the time, flood zones, main roads, bus stop out the front, whatever it may be. And these are the types of assets that you want to avoid, especially with a long-term hold. It's not like they're not going to perform as well from a capital growth perspective, but when you're getting a renter into a property, you want to make sure that it is something that is desirable, because if there is an influx of rentals that come in the future, you want to make sure that yours isn't going to be hindered compared to the other ones on the market.
Sure. Yep.
Cool. So as far as, I guess, cost and money, if you didn't have a guarantor loan for a $600,000 to $700,000 property, Kurt, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but out of that $150K, where are you thinking we're going to need to what are we going to need to put up?
Look, I'd have to have a review that my
The
funding
document.
sheet,
Yeah.
but like at 500k, we can go like what we call like a 95% lend. So when you factor in lender's mortgage insurance and some stamps, you're probably getting something done in the sort of the 500 around the 67 to 70k mark.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So that's deposit, everything covered. You you branch up to sort of 600, 650. You're probably getting closer to that sort of 100 grand mark. But I just want to call it out, if someone's got 150 grand and they've got good savings habits, they purchase one and they've got 50 grand left over.
Yeah.
They're going to still save.
Yeah.
But people need to realize that, if your habits are solid and your goals are to get to that, that will move us into the next purchase quickly, right? And then if we're going to pair, say, a 650 villa unit in Chelsea, Seaford, something like that, a real cracker, and we're going to go pair it with an apartment style play that's like a higher cash flow, and we need like a 500 budget, then you've got a combined asset value of sort of nearly 1.2, right? If we needed a 500 purchase and we know we only need 70 as a deposit, then you're only 20k off to get into that next one because you've already got 50, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So let's go into the next phase then, which is that acceleration. So we've bought our first property. Let's say we've used 100 grand and we've got 50,000 left over, and we're wanting to get to that property number 2 as quick as possible. As you mentioned there, we're not probably in a savings position right this second to go and buy again, correct?
Yeah, as the portfolio just sits, but we are buying in momentum markets, because they only really have one way to go. And when they move, as you know, it moves quite fast when property does move. When sentiment's high, it moves very fast, and we can extrapolate really, really pretty good bank valuations. So that's just for argument's sake. Say we purchase for 650 on the villa unit play in Chelsea, or it was a Geelong house, or whatever. It just doesn't matter. Call it 650. That property goes to, over in that 12-month period, it can go from 650 to 750. Right, but your loan against that property is maybe in the fives somewhere, like the high fives.
Interest rate, is that what you're referring to?
No, like the loan against the property.
Yep.
And we know we could borrow 80% against the property value, so it goes to 750.
Okay.
You can now borrow up to 600, right? So at that point, we can strip out the difference between 600 and what you owe.
Yep.
We're going to do exactly the same thing on the unit.
Okay.
We're going to buy a unit at 500, and it goes to 600. Your loan's 475. At 600, I can borrow 480.
Okay.
Oh, so it goes to 650, for example. So those moving up, we can then refinance, strip equity, and pull that equity together to then get us into the third one.
Okay.
While you're still saving.
All right, cool. So let's just re-jig and go over what you said there. So with the first deposit, we're going in with a 10% deposit with that first property.
No, 8%.
We're going with 80%?
8%.
8%.
Because it's 5% plus LMI.
Yep.
You got to factor it in. I just say, call it out as 8.
Yep.
So we're going to spend on that 650 property. We're going to use 100 grand. Cool. It's going to cost us 100 grand to get us into that property.
Yep. Lovely. Okay. And then with property number 2, we're going to be looking to use that 50K in the bank and save over that next 12 months. And then
or
ideally,
even 6 months,
6 months.
We need to try and get to 70 to then get into another one, right? Because essentially we can. It's just we're 20K off.
Yeah,
You'll big borrow and steal pretty quick when you want to try and get 20K together.
Cool. So 6 to 12 months post the first purchase.
Yep.
We're now in a position, if we've saved well, to now be able to buy the second property, which is an apartment/unit play in the Melbourne market. Now, from a lending perspective, are we going to be going with a very similar type of loan as the first one, or are we going to have to look at a third tier lender potentially?
I think on those two assets together, on a good income, FIFO income, rent vesting, I'll call that out now. So we're not paying $1,000 a week.
Important
to rent.
point to make.
We probably are renting and maybe living at home still, or renting with a friend, or your rent's pretty low. But if you've got a combined income, and there's two, like mum's working and dad's on FIFO income, two's probably going to be pretty cool.
Yep.
It'll be this third one where we have to look to be a little bit more creative with some lending stuff.
Gotcha. So we're going with a sharp rate on the first two.
Yep.
And now let's touch on that second property, what we're talking about specifically as far as a Melbourne apartment. I think a lot of people hear apartment and Melbourne apartment on that and get a little bit spooked. Now, I think it's important to note apartments come in very different shapes and sizes. You've got high rises that have 1,000 per building, and then you've got really small blocks in high-end locations that might only have anywhere from 8 to 20, where you're still getting some land content built in. And when we're talking about apartments, we're talking about these ones specifically. They're walk-up style, meaning that they're built in the 50s, the 60s, and they've got really low strata and high cash flow. So when we're talking about strata, we're talking specifically about when you buy a unit in these blocks, they're under a shared owners corporation. So you've got to buy into the maintenance and the insurance and everything that comes along with that building. So we want to make sure that we're around the $3,000 to $4,000 mark per year on that. And you see some that are upwards of 6,000 to 10,000 in these high-rise buildings, and that's not going to be good for the holding of the property because it's going to cost you a lot.
But worse off the scarcity. The scarcity factor is worse.
Yeah, you're not going to get the
And I
capital
think
growth.
we need to unpack that a little bit because it does come up a little bit in conversation as like, why wouldn't we buy that? Because it looks nice. And it's because, like you said, there could be like at least maybe like 300 of these things in the same complex. They're all the same.
Yeah, all the same.
And there's probably 10% of them are for sale.
Exactly.
There's no reason for you to buy that one versus the other one.
Yeah, and they're heavily investor owned.
Yeah.
And whereas in the boutique apartment blocks, you see them more dominated by owner occupiers. So owner occupiers are what drives growth in the property market. And if these are desired by that cohort, that's going to mean over time we're going to outperform an asset that is heavily investor driven as well. So that's an important thing to note. Now, with these properties, why we really like them even more now specifically is because of the cash flow side of things, right?
Yep.
We're buying ones that have got yields anywhere from 6 to 7.5%, meaning that if you're coming in with a deposit of 5%, it's going to be far easier to hold this type of property, and it's going to reduce the time that it takes for it to pay for itself, meaning being positively geared. And with the negative gearing changes, it's definitely important to have that front of mind as we move forward in our building of our portfolio.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. So how much roughly do you think we need for this second one? So we've probably saved around 70.
Go back to what I originally said, a 500 grand purchase. We can get it done for 70K, right? Now, there is products out there where we can go to like slightly higher LVRs. Interest rate can be slightly worse though.
Yep.
But I'm just going to use 70K as an example, as a ballpark figure there, but it's stamp duty, everything covered.
Yep.
And that will get you around that sort of fives. Now, the products that we are buying are moving a little bit quicker than they were.
Yeah.
And, but there's always going to be options, right? Because once those ones move 500, some of the other suburbs will start seeing their unit prices probably move as well,
Yep. Cool. So just to check back in, we've bought the first two properties now. We've ideally saved 30 to 50K from that first purchase to that second purchase so that we can have a little bit of a buffer. Again, if you are being aggressive in the earlier stages and you're younger, the buffers that you're working with are probably going to be lower than where you would want them to be. But this is a trade-off when you are wanting to build something bigger than the average person.
Yep.
So now let's look to purchase number 3 here. So you mentioned briefly before, this is where we're going to start to use equity. So hopefully within you've got 12 to 24 months from that first purchase, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be coming and speaking to you, and what are those conversations going to look like?
it all starts with valuations, right? So, we'll obviously make sure that, income hasn't changed and your savings savings is on plan. But we're gonna do a bunch of valuations on these properties. We're gonna go shopping at CBA, we're gonna go ING, we're gonna go anywhere just to see where we can get the best valuation. The higher the valuation we can achieve, the more equity we can extrapolate.
Gotcha. So the strategy is keep in touch with your broker. What's a good time frame for someone, I guess, to have regular conversations with a broker who's wanting to be a bit more aggressive? Is it every 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months. You find that people that are actively keen, they want to talk to me all the time. And it's important to note that, like, in markets that are moving fast, like, shit can jump. Like Perth is a prime example of that. It blows me away how shit jumped so quick there. But again, if we just look at the valuation piece, find where we can get the equity out of it.
Yep.
And that's going to allow us to strip what equity we can out of those two properties on a refinance, dump them into some offset accounts, and that money that we've pulled out is now like your next deposit.
Beautiful.
Right. And they're all split, and it's got its own little bucket of money. And then when we do a third purchase, but if we're sort of looking like we're capped, this is where we will go and do a company or trust structure style of entity to preserve some borrowing capacity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So from a rough timeline perspective, anywhere from 12 to 24 months or 36 months even from that first purchase, will likely be in an equity position if we've bought well, to where we can now look at buying number 3. So
yeah, and I think one thing we probably didn't touch on is to try and make sure that happens. Like some sort of slight renovation or value add could help you in that space as well, because that's the old-fashioned way of creating equity, was equity uplift through renovation. Now that could hurt your savings problem as well. So you're really only reliant on the market movement in our first scenario, right? But if you've got something where there's, like, I don't know, the ability to do a cosmetic renovation or something like that to lift the value, that's not a bad option as well.
yeah, so that's basically, if you can get in there and do some renovations, you're going to really reduce that time frame for that third purchase. And that, for the person that's wanting to get ahead and push the boundaries, this can be a really big lever that you can pull. One caveat I will say with that, which I see a lot of people, tradies specifically, get wrong, is they take that as the strategy, right? And they remove their focus from the location. With property investing, as you would know, it's all about location, and anything on top of that is an added bonus. So don't sacrifice the location just because you can do a renovation.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Suburb does the heavy lifting.
Yeah, cool. So now we're in that position. You've got valuations. We've picked out the couple best banks where we can, maximize the money for that number 3. Before we get into the purchase, are we having to go with a third tier lender potentially?
Yeah, look, if we're going to be capping ourselves borrowing capacity wise, that's kind of the reason you would do it, right? Because if you're like, if we buy this other purchase, the only other way we can ever get more money is interest rates come down, or you boost your income.
Okay.
That's or you're holding for a longer cycle, So you've got to be a little bit strategic there. But there's higher interest rates. There's a little bit more complexity with trust and company lending. So just got to be mindful there.
Yeah. So for all the listeners out there, a third tier lender is basically a non-bank who will charge you a higher interest rate but give you more access to debt.
Yeah.
For expansion of the portfolio, a strategy I've used personally is get in with the third tier lenders as that property grows in price in a year or 2 years' time. Have a chat with the mortgage broker and then look to refinance on a main bank. So understand that this is temporary, that extra cost, and you're going to have rents grow and you're going to be able to refinance. It's not signing yourself up for a lifetime on that rate.
Yeah. The reason why they do have more borrowing capacity at these lenders is at a mainstream bank, which, Commonwealth, Macquarie, NAB, we're assessing things at 3% higher.
Yep.
So mortgage interest rate 6%, 9%. We're assessing it at 9%.
Okay.
At a second tier lender or non-bank, it's 2%.
Yeah.
Some of them are 1%. Right. So that's why you can borrow more, because we're not the assessment rate's far lower.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. And let's get into the purchase for number 3. So this is where I guess you can go down many different routes, and a lot of people usually, you've bought 2 properties and you get all these grand ideas in your head, but I think it's important to stay on the right path. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But I think potentially we could look at a different market here, maybe get some diversity.
Yeah.
If you've gone in and bought 2 Melbourne assets and they have had that growth, it might be looking interstate. Again, we don't have a crystal ball here, so we don't know the market.
And we don't know what equity we can extrapolate.
Correct.
So it's probably a bit of a crystal ball question, but what a great outcome when you can get 3.
Correct. And I mean, you're probably going to be looking around the $600,000 mark hypothetically for that third one. But if you've come in now and you've bought for $600,000 originally, then $500,000, you got 1.1. If you see, let's say, 20% growth within that 2-3 year period, you're now sitting at, what's that, virtually a bit over 1.3. And now you've added another 600K property. You're basically at $2 million.
Yeah, and at that point, you could probably just hold for a 10-year cycle.
Yeah.
And your life will be drastically different at the end of it.
Definitely. That's a lot of the conversations I have is like, if you get to $2 million in your 20s or your 30s and you just hold that for the long term, that's going to put you in a very good position to retire. They say property doubles every, 10, 12 years. If you hold for 30 years, which is 3 doubles, hypothetically, 30, 40 years, you go from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. And likely you probably have virtually no debt on those properties. You got $16 million come retirement to buy a cash flow asset, to buy a commercial property, or live life on your terms. And I guess with this FIFO worker, do you see a lot of people wanting to build to get out, or what's a typical thing?
I mean, it's a great wealth creation tool. Leverage is the power, right? I think I've had a few clients that I've worked with that, they did the typical invest in shares or ETFs. They might have put 10 grand down and then they're chucking in $500 a pay or $500 $1,000 a month. Now you could earn 10% on your 10 grand, and by the end of the year you have this, X, and you can get a compound interest calculator, download one, and do it yourself. But if your asset starting at 1.1, you could just stay with inflation and you'd outpace investing in that because of the leverage.
Exactly right.
You're using someone else's money to have your asset base start higher. It just can't be. It's unparalleled better.
No, and that's why property will always beat shares if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because then once you figure out, okay, well, if I beat the market and I buy in the right locations and then my portfolio is actually growing at 10% a year hypothetically, well, that's a different beast in itself.
But in saying that, like using shares, ETFs and that to build your next deposit, is not a problem. Like, it's going to beat cash in the bank. It's just, and if you're 50, you probably shouldn't be taking on, like, trying to build a property portfolio. The later you leave it, the harder it gets. Time does the wonderful thing here.
Lovely. So is there anything else you can think of to mention before I've got some rapid fire questions to go in? Just to recap, we've been able to buy 3 properties in 3 years as a FIFO worker, coming in with anywhere from 150 to 200K income and roughly 150K in savings. We've built a $2 million portfolio in 3 years, and this is enough over the long term, letting compounding growth do its thing to really set ourselves up for a comfortable retirement and a life beyond the mines.
Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. Well, that's great. Well, let's get into some rapid fire before we close the potty up. Kurt, I've got a few for you and a couple questions from the audience. First one is, what's the biggest financial mistake you see FIFO workers make with their incomes?
Well, the confusing income versus like creating wealth, trying to be rich but not wealthy, right? So that's buying the cars, the jet skis, consumer debt.
Yep.
That makes you go backwards quicker than anything. You're financing something, which is taking money from your ability to save for something that's decreasing in value.
Yeah.
That's it. Don't do that.
No, and that's probably a very important thing to note, that in this equation that we've gone through, we're not probably allowing for any sort of bad debt, right?
Yeah, don't take on any bad debt and delay the gratification. Trust me, you'll get the cool cut stuff
Yep.
through your creating wealth through property.
Yeah. So fling them back to phase one in that preparation, clear all that bad debt before you start this journey.
Yeah, or just don't. If it's looking at you, staring down the barrel, I need a new car.
Yep.
And you work FIFO and you're not even at home 6 months a year, you don't need a new car.
No.
You're home, you don't need a new car. It's going to sit in the driveway.
Yeah, borrow mum and dad's or someone else's, or just have a cheap knock around one. If a FIFO worker starts this blueprint today at 25, what does their life realistically look like when they're 40, 50 years old?
Or even just go to 10 years at 35, that point of their life where they might be married with kids, and then 1.3, or they got 2 mil times 5%, that's a serious amount of coin that's going to transform into over 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And when you've got that much equity and cash flow on these properties, you can strip that equity and use it for all sorts of things. You could start a business. You could buy a PPR. You could shout yourself the new car.
Mm-hmm.
These are all the access things that property gives you the power to do with,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You've bought your own home. I haven't. I'm still on that wealth building journey, but I don't want to get to the point in 10 years' time where I've got a family and I want to live in a certain area and I can't afford it. I want to have those options, whether or not it's something I do. This blueprint is going to be able to put you in that position to have those choices.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. Third tier lenders, should FIFO workers be scared of them, or is that completely overblown?
Completely overblown. They're pretty common, and they're a solution-based product. And like I said, shit changes, you can refinance. They're a solution. Great products, really. And to be honest, the rates are arguably not that bad.
Yeah,
they used to be like big differences. Not anymore. Some of them are like just about better than some of the mainstream ones.
Yeah, I've got three of them myself, so I love them.
Yeah.
What's one market you'd tell every FIFO investor to be looking at right now?
Oh, yeah, the Melbourne, Victoria market in general, You can't really go past it if you're looking at value.
Yep.
Yeah, every other market, maybe bar Tassie or some obscure places, has seen significant growth. Maybe the NT hasn't seen as much, but if you're looking at Queensland, Perth, Sydney's also very expensive. So, from a value-based perspective, you can't go past it.
Yep, totally agreed. You've helped hundreds of FIFO workers build wealth through property. What separates ones who build serious wealth to the ones that don't?
Mindset. Yeah, the ones that just have a vision and like a plan. It doesn't mean you have to have it all worked out. People need to stop overthinking things.
Yeah.
But someone who's got a plan versus a no plan is going to be better than that person, right? So mindset.
Yeah. And last question, how do you balance building a big portfolio versus wanting a new home to live in, a family home?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is, because the rent investing is pretty common now. I think at some point you'd have to make a call whether or not rent investing's you for the rest of your life, or sell down a sell down period to pay out and buy a PPR, because we know that if we sell down, clear out and have very little debt on the PPR, we can have oodles of equity.
Yeah.
And you can then go back into, 10, 12 years time, you could then sell down the Melbourne properties, buy the PPR, and then all of a sudden Perth's at the bottom of its cycle, and we'll re-leverage up then.
Yeah.
Everything's moving at different paces. There will always be opportunities in the property market.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point as well, understanding what that dream home looks like. Like if you're going to pull the trigger on something that you don't see yourself in long term, and then you're going to stop your portfolio building for the next 2-3 years because of this extra debt, well, maybe that's not the right move for you. But if you're in that position where you can go and do that, and the market might be a little bit depressed, you get in at a good price, it's also a very good option for that type of person at the same time.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, Kurt, that was great. I think that's a really good blueprint for FIFO workers, and you would see it. You've done this plan with many people. It's super achievable. You've just got to have the right team, the right mindset, put it into play, take action, and you'll be on your way to setting yourself up for a comfortable retirement. Thanks for coming on.
No dramas. Anytime.
Appreciate it always. If you guys want to reach out to Kurt and speak to him, how can the listeners get onto you?
www.bluecollarmoney.com.au is my website, but also my Instagram, the Savvy Prospector, is my main handle. Pretty easy to find me on Instagram. So yeah.
Yeah, you've probably seen him before, but yeah, thanks again, mate. And thanks for everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.